Just let everybody kind of trickle in here for a minute and we'll start talking about AI and all of the wonderful and terrible things that it could be used for in the future here as we see it get more and more developed, and it's already honestly in here and ready to work. And so I think it'll be really good. So real quick, while we kind of let people trickle in, I'll get started here. So we're Vector Choice, and again, we're talking about AI, kind of business risks, advantages, a few of those things. We're going to keep this short, hopefully at about a half an hour. Hit on some of these things. So what I would also say is at the end, we've got contact information. So if you like some of these ideas or worry about some of these ideas, reach out to us afterwards, and we'd love to talk more about either how you can implement this or get more security or whatever it might be in your business to try to help potentially protect from it. But a lot of those become very specific kind of conversations around what you want to do. So panelists and who we've got today is, so I'm Mike Bazar. I'm the CTO and a partner here at Vector Choice. We got Bo Dickey, who's the Chief Security Officer at Vector, and then Rodney, who's the CEO at Cooley Tech, and then Rodney as well is really a lot here is our AI expert for sure. He's written a book about AI and using it in your business and other things. And Rodney, I know you got a second you want to give a quick overview of your expertise in AI.
Yeah, I wrote a book, Wisconsin AI Leadership, but be happy to talk to you folks down in Texas and across the country, of course, as well. So we help businesses on how to get shovel-ready AI projects that they can start implementing immediately for using for like quoting or creating of RFPs or HR docs, well, without PAI or PHI data, of course. And really just what are all the different things that people can do today with the AI that is available, as well as keeping our head to the ground on what do we see coming out in the near future in the next 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, no, that's great. So a couple of things about us as Vector Choice, just quickly, we've been named to the MSP 501, Inc. 5000, the Titan 100, Atlanta's, best and brightest companies to work for. So we've been around for a while, and I don't know, I like to kind of tout our awards and say, look at us, look at us. But the truth is, I really say we throw them up here just to kind of say we're not fly by night, and we tend to know a little bit of what we're talking about as well as we go through it. We've got offices or have worked all over the place. So we've even got people internationally and other stuff, kind of big companies everywhere. As we merged this year, a couple of companies, Will and I merged to be partners. We moved the HQ over to Lubbock, where I had started my business a bunch of years ago. And anyway, so that's kind of where we're at and who we are a little bit. But getting into the meat and potatoes and why everybody wants to be here is, what is AI, right? So AI is artificial intelligence. I think a lot of people know the keywords and what it is. But I think some of the things that I would say are I don't know, interesting or whatever is that, we've been using things like Siri, Google Home, Alexa, those sorts of things. And those are built on AI models. Now, there's a lot of stuff coming out now when you hear about OpenAI, ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and these other models that are out there that are getting more and more complex. And that's the stuff where we're seeing a lot of really cool things come out, because truthfully, Siri and a lot of those were like web searches, and the AI was really about translating and trying to figure out the intent of the question more than anything. And I think a lot of people agree on here, they can be terrible at it, right? Like, you can ask questions and not get the data that you want, or if you ask a follow-up question, it doesn't understand. So a lot of these early AI models that we've been exposed to were very rudimentary, and quite honestly, I always say that, like Siri and some of them are dumber than a box of rocks, because they'll give you a web search and that's it, right? Or they'll give you a little bit of information and that's it. It's really handy walking around, not having to type something, shouting out to Alexa or Siri or whatever's in your house, how far is the earth from the sun and all these other things that they talk about, set an appointment, do this, make a reminder. Those things are really great. And again, driven a little bit on the back end by some of the AI models. But I think is the stuff we're going to continue to talk about here, I think is really interesting when you start looking at what is actually what they're capable of. So real quick, the question, I guess, of the day is, sorry, I was making sure here somebody didn't punch me, they're messaging me something. But anyways, AI is transforming or threatening your business. And the truth is it's doing both, right? We're going to talk about some advantages and disadvantages next. But I think, there's a lot of things where you can look at the power of AI and what it can do that can be really, really good. And then is it a threat to your business? And what I would say is, we'll get more when we talk about the threats in the next, couple slides, talking some of the security threats. But also, if you have a really commoditized, very easy, like a data entry businesses and things like those are going to be a higher actual risk that AI could take that over. But I think there's also going to be a lot of stuff where if you're on the cutting edge of it, you just find transformative ways to use AI to process data better, faster, more of it. And if you can stay ahead of it, then I think that's where it'll be a really big bonus to it. So really, let's get into the advantage, disadvantage, then Rodney and Bo will really get more out of you guys here talking about this. So Rodney, I know you've been knee deep in this, right? So I mean, this is a list of stuff, but what are some of the examples, some of the things that you have used AI for in your own business, helped other businesses, when you're out talking, I know you've done several presentations in front of people where you talk for an hour or two or three about AI. What are some of those things that you're really seeing?
The most I use AI for would be writing HR policies for basically you can do a real quick paragraph of the general of what you're looking for. I want to give employees 2 weeks of vacation a year, right? Can you please write this into a policy for that I can put out there in my handbook? It goes and writes it really, really quickly. One of the more advanced tools that we use it for is I will do it for quoting or quote creation. There was a large client of ours, a nationwide medical firm that was looking for internet access for their remote trailers they have out across the country. So I ran my numbers, just had a little spreadsheet of numbers. I copy and pasted those random numbers in there. So you create an executive brief and a summary of services and a pro and cons. And it spit out a beautiful 3-page summary that had all that I sent to this client. And they told me it was one of the best quotes they'd ever seen before. So really, someone like myself, I do not have a great written my writing skills are very, very low, ironically enough, as an author of multiple books. But AI allows me to take my general ideas that I have and put them into what sounds fairly intelligent. I can type in there and say, I have a good idea. Please tell me what it is. And the AI can tell me what it is. And then I go in and refine it. Or if I'm going and trying to explain to someone, why is it important to have multi-factor authentication? Or another example I gave was I was speaking in front of 160 behavioral health specialists, and I knew nothing about behavioral health. So I was trying to explain to them what is AI to them. I literally just asked the AI, I said, hey, I'm speaking to 160 behavioral health specialists. Can you give me an analogy on what AI and behavioral health have in common? And it came up with some analogy for cognitive behavioral therapy, which I had no idea what it was, right? But it gave me a paragraph. I sat there and read it in front of the group, and everyone's like, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, at the end, I told them, if that made sense for you, I knew nothing about that. AI told me how to tell you what AI is. So it helps me to connect with a number of individuals, regardless of what industry they're in, to connect what I have inside my head in words that they will understand. And that's all, of course, just talking language models. We're not talking vision processing or any of the other type of AI that are out there. But in today's world, 99% of what everyone says AI is referring to the language models.
Yeah. We even use it, and this is, to me, is a silly but incredibly practical example of one of our techs. When you put in ticket notes, he was either incredibly brief or very matter of fact. And so just didn't, zhuzh it up a little bit or whatever, right? Like, and not that needs to be a big deal, but if you read text in a certain way, like if you're in a bad mood and you get an email that asks a question and it's fairly frank, you might think somebody's being snarky and they're not or whatever. So we actually told him to just start putting all of his ticket notes in Chat GPT, right? As long as it didn't have personal information, all the other stuff, but like just put what you were going to type into Chat GPT and see, rewrite this professionally, then copy and paste that and put it in your ticket note. And it was funny because we actually had a couple of people that came back that had, it was one big company work for us. There's a lot of tickets for them. And they said, hey, is he like, he just seems snarky recently or something. I don't know what, the tone change was. Or anyways, they all came back 2 days later. They're like, man, this is great. He's gotten so much better in his responses. And it was just like, you're going to type it anyways. It takes 3 seconds to hit go and type and write this professionally and then copy and paste it. Like little things like that, even that can be really, really interesting. You want to write an email, write the email, put it into Chat GPT and say, rewrite this in a friendly tone or something else if you're worried that your tone of your email won't be right or you'll come across as cranky or jerky or whatever it might be. There's little simple examples of things like that. I think
that's great for those that are more technically oriented, especially technicians, because they are good. They could tell you if you ask them a question, they'll give you a one-line response, right?
Yeah.
Well, AI knows how to fill in all the fluff, basically all the assumed knowledge that technician just assumes everyone else knows.
Yeah.
It fills in the assumed knowledge because you can tell it the target that you're trying to communicate to. And as soon as you do it, it knows what the assumptions are that the technician made and can fill that in. And it sounds nice, friendly, and personable.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think, oh, go ahead, Bo.
I was just gonna say, um, from the cybersecurity perspective, when we're doing incident response, you have a lot of data that you have to be able to aggregate and put that into a human readable format to be able to get in front of decision makers to help them decide what to do in the heat of a moment. And they're already emotional. They're tons of emotions. There's anger at the threat actor. There's concern over their business. All of those things, and that tends to muddy the perception of the responses that they're getting. And so, being able to take that information, put it in through, feed it through AI, to like Rodney had said, to humanize it a little bit more, to make it, ironically, you're using it to humanize the context, to make it where it's in a more human readable format so that it's easier to ingest when someone's in a heightened emotional state. And it's been successful for us in using it that way as well.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of little things, right? Like, you talked about some of it, like, just hitting the bullet points of some of these automating repetitive tasks. The other day I needed to pull a list, and it was a list that was on a website and it was displayed weird, and it was a bunch of email addresses I had to get, and it was in a big form. And anyways, I copied and pasted it into Excel. But then when I pulled the Excel list of all of the stuff, it had a whole bunch of spaces and other things because I wanted to post it into an Outlook and send a message to this group of people. And so I pasted that list into ChatGPT and said, remove all of the spaces or, like extraneous data. And it just spit it right out. And if I had to manually do it, it would have been 10, 20, 30 minutes, depends on how long the list is and all these other things. But I could chuck it in there and ChatGPT kicked it right out. I was talking to my brother, and this is where I think you can do really interesting things. And so he's a part owner of a big RV park. And so they were basically trying to figure out ways to not say no, because there was no all over. He's like, we need to have more fun here, right? We can't have these no signs. And so one of the examples they gave is they had an antique piano in the lobby. And what they wanted was kids to not come over and bang on it. But if you knew how to play the piano, that was fine. Use the piano. That's what it's there for. It's supposed to be fun. So they asked ChatGPT, hey, how do we protect this antique piano and find a way to say, if you know what you're doing, use the, feel free to play. And if not, don't use it. And it came up with 10 ideas, or I think they said, give me 10 ideas. And it was like, improper use of this piano will cause earthquakes in Singapore, like goofy, weird things, but very much implied without saying, don't do something. Hey, if you know what you're doing, play it. If you don't touch it, and so it's little things like that where it might be hard, but in the middle of a meeting when they're talking about it, ChatGPT starts kicking out these answers and they can go, that one sounds great, print it, right? So there's a lot of these little things, I think, where you can find solutions on the fly in meetings. We need ideas on this. How do we do that? Hey, what are 10 ways we could do X, Y, Z, whatever it might be. You can ask it marketing questions. You can ask it all kinds of stuff. And that's where I think there can be a lot of this really low hanging fruit, right? And I think, some of the other stuff that's out there can get a lot more complicated, right? When you talk about automating manual processes, you can build models, kind of like Rodney was talking about, like you can build chatbots and other things where it'll respond and give answers and do things. Those tend to take a little more work to get them right. They're not necessarily difficult, but there's a lot of low hanging fruit, I think, out there where you can just use AI to ask it questions, rip stuff off, sort data, find things, give it a bunch of numbers and say, do this to it, those sorts of things. And even in our business too, we've seen stuff where it's like, hey, write a script to do blank. And then we just have to verify that the script is good, but we don't have to think through how to write the script. And it'll write that script really, really quick compared to somebody maybe taking 20 or 30 minutes to write it and test it and write it and test it or whatever. It'll kick the script out. We look over it, we test it, verify it's good, move on with life, right? And the other advantage, I think, of the more complex models is you can ask them more follow-up questions, right? And if you use it right, I think there's a lot of power in that where you can say, hey, do this. Okay, now do this. Okay, now do this. Okay, now do this. And those sorts of things can be really good. We had it, like, this is not a work example, but I think is a funny example is my daughter had to do a presentation on Sally Ride, first woman astronaut. And so it was supposed to be the parents create the presentation and the kids were going to give it, like, we were supposed to help them write the speech. And so I just told ChatGPT, I came home, my wife was, fretting over like trying to pull all these details and whatever. And I said, just open up GPT and say, write a 5-minute presentation on Sally Ride. And it kicks out this 5-minute presentation. If you read it, it took about that long. Said, now write it for a 7-year-old. And it rewrote it in much simpler language, but it was a little bit longer when she read it. So I said, now make it shorter. And it cut some stuff out and made it shorter, right? I didn't have to keep re-ask. I just asked it to keep changing the last output. And that kind of thing made it where we wrote this speech essentially in 10 minutes or 15 minutes with reading it and playing with it. And that would have probably taken my wife an hour or two to really go through and do all of it. And that's like, if you start trying to think of how can I do that in business or life, that's where you can get a lot of, stuff out of that. And then again, I think there's a lot of really great things like Rodney said of how do you go write an HR process? Well, that can take a long time for somebody to write an HR process and tweak it, but you can just chat GPT, write a process to do that. So,
Yeah, one other example I have for that is I was in a legal dispute over some land easement, and I had no idea land easement law was so complicated, right? Well, I set up we had an arbitrator coming out there, so I set up two different AIs. One was going to act as the prosecutor, and one was the defense. And then I had them basically as an arbitrator, listening to both sides of it, and went through the legal process, and then asked each of them, "All right, what is your finding based off these different arguments?" And it mirrored pretty well what the actual arbitrator ended up deciding. And I used it to go look up based off AI. This was ChatGPT 4.0, but give me case law for these different use cases that I'm trying to present. And it came up with 10 different case laws. Now, 7 of them were completely made up, fake, didn't exist. The AI literally lied to me, right? 3 of them ended up being used in our actual presentation with them and were part of the deciding factor on it. So it's a good example of you have to double check everything the AI is telling you. It will give you good information, but it will also lie to you and tell you with as much confidence it lies as it does a positive or truths.
yeah. Yeah. So that's why, yeah, trust but verify, right? And a lot of those things, and maybe you don't even trust some of the time. But yeah, no, I think that's the stuff where you can definitely use it. There was actually a lawyer who got in trouble. He went and argued a case. You probably heard the story, but he went and argued the case, and all of his case law was made up because ChatGPT just spit out a bunch of gibberish basically, and he took it, didn't re-verify it, went and tried to argue a case citing all this case law that was not real case law.
Yeah, it looks real. It has case numbers, the date, the court it was done, so and so versus so and so. The fake stuff it was created was I mean, it was good.
That's funny. Yeah. No, and I think, with all of it, right? Like it's how can you find these things? That's why you see like Microsoft just released Copilot, which you can add to your Office 365 subscription if you want, but basically they're integrating it across Office. It's got a lot of Chat GPT backend stuff, I think, from OpenAI or whatever. But what they're trying to do is integrate it into kind of hit this list, right? Can they help automate simple tasks? Can it help you write that paper? Can it help you do these things that you were already going to do, but now it can chime in and make it better, faster, quicker, double check things for you, pull data for you, and do it in a more intelligent way a lot of the time than you just going and doing Google searches or whatever for that data. And I think there's going to be a lot of power in that comes out of it. And so, what I would say in terms of these advantages, if you have things, repetitive tasks, manual processes, things that are annoying, I wish I could do this faster. Those are great things to start investigating of how could I build something that AI would use this model, an AI model to help fix this, do that, where you could dump in data and then it kicks out the answer that you want or whatever it is. And you start figuring out what those things are and you can really increase people's productivity. And that's where I think AI will be really, really good. And then kind of piggybacking a little bit off of, what Rodney was saying of made up stuff, risks are a big problem, right? Like you really got to think through this. And so, Bo, I'll let you kind of talk through some of these as well, like, the deep fakes and the non-existent, those sort of things. But Rodney and I were just talking beforehand, and Bo, I think, you were as well, but like some of these deep fakes and how good they're getting and how it'll be able to be, some of these weird crimes that happen, you'll be able to use AI to really do that. One of the things we've seen an uptick in is like just spam, right? It was really easy to identify phishing because the email, like the English sucked. Well, now ChatGPT can write really, really good English for them. And so it can actually kick out really good junky messages that you'll read and they seem legitimate and it, doesn't have bad grammar and the spelling is all right. That's easy for anybody to go do at this point. And so it opens up this door to a lot of these risks. And so Bo, I'll kind of let you go first, but what are you seeing from the cybersecurity side of it that you see the risks of AI?
Yeah, some of the biggest risks we're seeing are the phishing campaigns have gotten a lot more robust. It's harder to spot them. They've even started using, some of the threat actors have started using it to build the campaigns to where it evades the common security controls that exist for spam filters. So they're now making it through the spam filters a lot faster with higher success rates. They're targeting their attacks at individual organizations doing the same way. They're literally asking the AI frameworks to design an attack vector that specifically says, and how do I evade detection? Those are the big things that we're seeing, but the deep fakes have really started making a huge splash. There was a news article I was reading the other day, and it was about this organization that was on a live Zoom call, and the person had impersonated the individual that was supposed to be on the receiving end using deep fakes, and they extorted $25 million from that company through a deep fake on a live chat
Yeah.
video call, just like this Zoom call.
Yeah, Ronnie, can you touch on it? Because you had said you named a couple models when we were talking before that like you've seen this where you could use it in Teams or Zoom or whatever, where you could do these and you could basically create on the fly real time deep fakes.
Yeah, so that's it. Microsoft had one from a voice perspective that you can take 3 seconds of someone's voice and actually give you a perfect emulation of their pitch, tone, and have a conversation back and forth with them. Some of the limitations of those are you need to have a lot more tech knowledge on how to set up the back, because you have to have a private server that it's been configured. However, recent advancements like the Sora model that was announced last week by OpenAI gives you 4K live video that's Hollywood grade film off just simple prompts. Or there's a Goka processor chip out now that I believe it was 50,000 times faster than the current processor chips for language models, which means that you have the ability in a standard computer to go ahead and have live chat back and forth without relying upon a software as a service model like Copilot or ChatGPT or any of those. So especially we start looking at the next 3 to 6 months out there, as this technology is just advancing at rocket pace, these tools are getting more and more distributed so that it's not just the tech giants. And normally even the open source models end up only being about 3 months behind the industry leaders. So these open source models then are becoming easier and easier for hacker groups or threat actors to spool up on their own. And then you can bypass all the protection that the responsible companies like OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, or Meta are putting into their models. You can just completely bypass them. And I mean, it's going to be the wild, wild west from AI perspective here very, very quickly. With models that there's no way you're going to be able to tell it they are not humans on the other end, unless you're literally physically in front of them shaking their hand.
Yeah, and I think you've seen that even like some of the goofy TikTok videos or whatever, right? Disclaimer, I don't have TikTok, don't use it, don't want to. There's a whole bunch of Chinese data scraping thing we can get into or whatever. But you see them, they end up on Facebook or wherever else where people do it with like Tom Cruise and these other videos where somebody's, washing dishes and they turn around and it's Tom Cruise. And you can kind of see maybe the filter breaks here or there, so you know it is, but like those are even getting better and better and better, right? And you even think of little goofy things like how good the filters are for Instagram or Snapchat and all these other things. That technology is now going where they can just duplicate your whole face and do these other things and have them. And there's sad stories too, where like, I've seen, and I don't know, it's, news articles or other things where like somebody thought that their daughter was in trouble because they were using a deep fake voice and somebody was like, hey, send me money or whatever. And they were basically pretending they were, whatever. I don't know. I've heard different ones. One, I heard there was actually a kid that they got him to like go camp in the woods and whatever, and he almost died. They found him, which is good. Happy ending story. The other one I've heard, it's like travel scams. Hey, I'm stuck in wherever and I need you to send me money. And we've seen that stuff happen before where like you get a random Facebook message and it's like, I'm stuck overseas and I need you to, Venmo me or wire me money. Well, now the problem is they can start doing that with a voice if they wanted to, right? So you might get a phone call, you don't recognize the number, and then get this really compelling argument that, well, I'm here and I'm stuck and I need money. So what this leads to, I think, especially from the business stuff, I start thinking about, wire fraud scams. I start thinking about the goofy gift card scams where somebody says, hey, buy this so many gift cards and, whatever, all those kinds of things. And so I think what you'll start to see more and more of is that stuff is going to get harder and harder to detect, which means it's going to be more and more important for companies to have policy in place, right? Where you're really looking at like, how do we have a policy in place for wire transfers, and if you don't do any wire transfers, just call the bank and tell them I don't want to do wire transfers, disable it on my account. We're not going to do it. But at a minimum, making sure that you have a method of if a wire transfer has to be made and somebody requests, then you're going to call in a different method or whatever, the phone number you have on hand. You know, you write this policy out and say, this is how we verify it, because it's going to get easier and easier and easier for the bad guys to do this. And that's where the, I think a lot of these risks come up. I think the other thing that's kind of up there and we haven't hit on is like data privacy and other stuff. One, when you're using any of these AI models, they'll tell you don't put in, private information and other stuff. So like make sure you're not putting PII or other things in there. You're not giving it data that it could use that isn't generally readily available on the internet. That kind of stuff is what I would say, or data that when you give it to it doesn't make sense, right? You give it a bunch of numbers and say, give me the average of this. Like that doesn't necessarily make sense, but all that data is being aggregated somewhere. And when security breaches happen, I say when, because everybody's getting breached everywhere all the time, it seems like, that data is going to come out and it's going to be attached to your account, and they could potentially use that to start trying to, use AI and figure out what that is, or can I use this to do something that, gives me information you wouldn't normally expect, everything else. So make sure, as a company, I guess, that you kind of have rules and regulations around, process of how are you going to use AI? What are you going to use it for? If it's public models, how do you make sure you don't put data in there that could get you in trouble? Because there's a whole lot of data privacy laws out there that deal with data breach stuff, but they're going to start wrapping in AI, I would think, sooner than later, because it's going to be a problem, right? And I think the AI guys take it seriously, but it's just going to be hard. I think. Go ahead.
One of the questions that pops into my head when I hear the organizations that we talk to on a daily say that their employees are using Chat GPT or Gemini or whatever the Microsoft has Copilot, but I forget what the one wrapped into Bing is, but I know it's Chat GPT on the back end. But point is when they tell me their employees are doing these things where they're using it to write better emails or to structure better reports and presentations, is how are you monitoring what information they're putting in there? How are you making sure that they're following the policy you had them sign about how to use AI effectively, but how are you verifying that for your employees? And that's one of the questions that pops into my head. And we've used AI in our business and use it in our cyber defense to automate some of those repetitive tasks, ingest the data, parse it quickly, and identify trends. But we're also using tools to track and monitor the AI to ensure employees aren't leaking that type of information. We're making it so that we get alerts, our security team and is activated, we can go look at that to see whether it was a false positive or not. Because again, you still have to verify the information that the AI is giving you or that's going into it.
Yeah.
So that's a big question that I think is important to ask when you get done watching this webinar, and just sit for 5 minutes and think about how many times have you used it? How many of your employees are using it, and what are they putting there? And how do you know that that's what they're actually putting there?
Yeah. And
'Cause
real
that's
quick, while we're still talking, I'm just gonna flip. If you guys have questions, please start putting them in the Q&A. Because like I said, we're trying to keep this around a half an hour. And then here's some info if you guys want to do strategy session, talk more about this or anything else. But put questions if you guys have any in. But one of the things I wanted to mention too is like one of the AI tools we're using is on our ticketing systems. So when you turn in tickets, it's got this data lake where it's going and looking at all the different tools and other things, saying, hey, you turned in a ticket on a printer issue. Here's 3 other printer issues the same company had over the last year and a half. And here's a knowledge base that somebody wrote in your documentation. And so it just pulls all this stuff to the tech's fingertips where they don't have to go looking for it, right? And we're seeing this increase in productivity where people are able to get data out of multiple systems that we had all at once, right? And, stuff like that, we're paying for a model. It's not a public model. It's, all these other things because data security and things are important. But that's where we're starting to also see a lot of these things where you can go through and analyze these data. Because as much as I want to say, techs are going to go look at every ticket you've ever had, like it's not feasible. You call them with a printer problem and they're going to start solving the printer problem. But if the AI model can go, here's 3 other times this similar problem has happened, man, that guy can get to the heart of that issue a lot faster usually, and also correlate and go, you know what, this is repetitive. This happened 3 times in a week. Or 3 weeks or whatever it is. Because you might call in and get tech A and they fix the problem. And then you call in, you get tech B and they fix the problem. And then you get tech A again, but it's been a few weeks and you might not connect the dots, right? But now with the AI, you can go, hey, this is the 3rd time you've called in a few weeks. Let's dig deeper into this and make sure this problem doesn't keep happening, because there's obviously a bigger issue here. So, Rodney, you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, on that, the big concern is obviously AI is going to replace everyone's job. And just like that, AI won't replace people's job. What it will do is make skilled individuals be able to do more every single day. And regardless of what industry that you particularly are skilled at, AI is really a multiplier to your own skills. And if you go and blindly use it, like the lawyer example I was giving you before, you'll end up using bad case law. But if you're a skilled lawyer, you can go ahead and review these are real, these aren't. And any industry that you're working with, what I always encourage everyone is just try one. If you're not using any AI, go to Copilot, the Bing chat version of it, and just try one thing a day just to see what it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Ask it one thing or see what it does and whatever else. I mean, it's funny. I have my kids do goofy things with it as well. And ask questions. I'm even I'm teaching for our scout troop, an entrepreneur class, and you're supposed to write a business plan. And I told all of them, use AI to write the business plan, but then I want you to understand it. And you're going to have to explain it, but you don't need to do the busy work of writing it. AI will write a business plan. So you got to come up with the idea. You got to tell it what you want, and then let AI write the business plan and then come back and we'll talk about it. Right. And I think those are the kinds of things that'll be really, really useful, where to tell a 12, 14, 16-year-old to write a business plan, like, what are you going to get out of that? But if the AI model can kick out a business plan and they can look at it and try to understand it, that makes that a much more manageable thing and task. So, Bo, do you have any final thoughts?
Just the as much as we enjoy using AI and we all want to integrate it into our business, the key takeaway I would say is focus on how you can use it, but ensuring that it's being used in a safe manner that isn't going to land your business or your employees in hot water for leaking the data. And if anybody has any questions about that or wants to dive deeper in how we can help with that, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to do so in any fashion that we can, to advise you on how you can use it, but in safe ways.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any other questions or anything that came up. And so I hope you guys all have a great day. And like I say, shoot us an email. You can scan that QR code or just go to vectorchoice.com/strategy session. And if you want to talk more about AI and other stuff, we'd love to. If it's something that we think Rodney would be the expert, we can pull him over as well and help get connected or whatever. But would love to talk to anybody about either using AI in your business or other random questions or things you might have. But shoot us an email, give us a call, or book a strategy session if you want to talk more about AI and how you can use it in the business and what other things you might be able to do to streamline tech and whatnot. And yeah, we hope you guys all have a fantastic rest of the week.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, Rodney.
everyone.
Thanks for being on. Thanks, Bo.
Have a great one.